night, everybody. We're waiting here to see everyone, to give everyone a chance to get online. I'm excited that we're doing another live today, and hopefully we'll be able to do many lives coming in the future. Today, I want to, we'll go into it in a little bit, let people on, but today we're going to go through obviously your questions and answers. I'm going to give you some answers to those questions that you have out there. And also I want to go through in the beginning, we'll talk a bit about the 214B and what that means and what the refusals are and how we can avoid those into the future. So before we get started, just while people are coming on, and when you come on, please make sure to let me know where you're from, where you're coming from in the chat, because I like to know where everybody is in the chat so we know, so I know who I'm talking to and where you guys are all from. I will be answering questions. Like I said, I will be doing that at the end, so stick around. We're going to leave a little bit more time this time compared to last time, so there's more room for questions than I had last time. Last time we were a little bit rushed on the questions, so this time I want to give it a little bit more time for questions at the end so we can get to all of them or most of them. Okay, I see we're from Pakistan. Amazing. Hello, Pakistan. Ghana. Hello, Ghana. Excited to see where everyone's from. So make sure if you're coming on now, make sure you let me know in the chat where you're from. India, thank you. Happy to have all of you on at all days and times, because some of us are in the morning, some of us are in the afternoon, some of us are at night. So wherever you are in the world, welcome. Oh, we have some people from America, from the US. Good. Anyway, so I want to introduce myself. Let's get started. I'm Andrea Szew, if you don't know me already. I am a U.S. immigration attorney, and I've been a U.S. immigration attorney for the last over 20 years. I've been doing this. So I have, in the last years, tried really hard to get information out to all of you about visa interviews, about different types of visas, about what's going on in the world of immigration. So this is another effort doing the live to try to interact with you more intimately, to see if I can answer some of your questions live. Don't forget, after the video, after we're done with this live, it's going to get posted on YouTube, and you can go ahead and look back at it. I will put underneath this video lots of links for you. I'll give you links to free interview guides, free U.S. visa interview guides and checklists. I'll give you links to, if you want to set up a one-on-one consultation with me, there'll be a link down there for that. And anything else that we kind of touch on in this live, I will put links below this video after it's over, so you can go back and you can actually link and get in touch with me or get the free interview guide or whatever you need. I will try my best to put everything below, so after this is over, you can get a hold of that information. For the new people joining, hello, hello. I am going to today talk about 214B refusals, and I'm going to leave a lot of time at the end of this to talk about questions. So hold your questions to the end. I know if anyone wants to do super chats, feel free, and I'll try to get to those questions first. But I will do questions at the end. But I do want to touch base on some things that we didn't have a chance to maybe talk about before in our last live chat that I think are really important. And I want to focus this chat on something. In every chat, I kind of want to talk about something different. And the other thing I want to do is I want to go through with you kind of like my week of visa interviews, what I've experienced with clients or people that I've called, to kind of help you understand and have a real life experience of what a visa interview and what happens, and also what the issues are that come up at a visa interview. For example, like when someone goes to interview, I want to go through with you what happens at the interview and what we did to help correct that client, so the next time they go in, they actually get approved. So we're going to go through some real life experience interviews. Hold on, everyone. I'm going to switch over here. I'm switching over to Wi-Fi Hopefully that makes it a little bit clearer. I'm getting a note that it's a little bit blurry. So hopefully that makes it a little bit clearer for everybody out there. Okay, give me a thumbs up if everyone is seeing everything okay and you can hear me fine and you can see me fine. Give me a thumbs up when you get a chance in the chat so I know everything's going okay. Okay, so we're going to talk about 214B, and we're going to also talk about a real life experience of a visa interview, what happened, why they got refused, and then when they came to us, what we did to actually help them get approved. And then I will take questions and I will give you answers at the end of this. So let's get started here. 214B. What is 214B? I'm sure a lot of you, tell me in the chat, give me a thumbs up. It's kind of a thumbs down. But if you ever had a 214B denial or refusal, give me a thumbs up or thumbs down in the chat. What is a 214B? If some of you don't know, it means that you did not provide the information that you were supposed to at the interview. It's the failure to demonstrate really immigrant or non-immigrant intent at your interview. So does it mean that you did something horrible or that you're forever going to be denied? Absolutely not. It does not mean if you get a 214B refusal or denial that you can't apply again. It doesn't mean that you're forever barred. It doesn't mean that this is the end of the world. Okay, this just means that in that particular time, at that particular interview, you did not prove or demonstrate sufficiently enough for the officer your non-immigrant intent. Okay, so understand that that's very important because a lot of people think that if they get a 214B denial or refusal, that's it. And a lot of times, if not most of the time, the officers don't really explain to you why you're getting a 214B. You go to the interview and you think you did a good job sometimes, and then all of a sudden the officer says you're refused and hands you a piece of paper, 214B, and you're sitting there going like, why did I get that? I mean, it's extremely frustrating. So, if this has happened to you, I'm sure you can relate. I'm sure you understand that this is a very frustrating experience, and especially when you don't know why you got that 214B refusal. So what does it really mean? It doesn't mean a lifetime ban. It doesn't mean that you did something wrong. It doesn't mean that you're a criminal. It doesn't mean anything like that. It just means that you did not sufficiently provide the information you needed in order to get that approval. For example, if you are doing a student visa, maybe your funding letter wasn't sufficient enough. If you're doing a visitor visa interview, maybe your purpose of the trip was vague. So those are the reasons why you would get a 214B denial or refusal. So it's kind of like an overarching reason to deny your visa. It does not mean always that there's one particular reason. It's not always ties to your home country that you didn't satisfy. It doesn't mean that it's always one thing. It could be a many different reasons that the officer will lump under a 214B denial. And that's why it can be very frustrating because you don't really know. And when you fill out your DS-160 the next time you go in and they say, were you ever refused a visa? And you have to mark yes, because you were refused a visa prior. Then you have to understand that if you mark yes, there's a little explanation box. And if you don't know why you were refused a 214B, it's very hard and very frustrating, again, to know what to put in that box. And I've done videos that you can check out. I'll put a link below of what to do if you get a 214B denial and you have to file again on your DS-160 and you don't know what to do with that box. You don't know what to put in it. You don't know what to say because you have no idea why you were denied. So I'll put that link below this video after we're done so you can check that out if that's happened to you and you don't know what to put in that box. Because a lot of times you just put there's a misunderstanding, or if you really do understand what happened, you can explain. So that's part of what we do also when we set up consultations. We try to help you figure out why you were actually denied for your 214B. Okay? So what the reality is really when you go up to that window is the officer only has the 2 minutes or the 3 minutes. So whatever questions they ask you, a lot of times that's what's going to cause the 214B denial, the answers that you give to those questions. So you have to be very careful on what the answers you give are. All right, so let's talk really quickly, and then I want to get into the real life scenario of an actual visa interview that happened this week, Or, well, it happened a few weeks ago, but they went back this past week and they actually got approved after we talked. But some things that really will give you that 214B denial are these things. Inconsistent answers. Do not give inconsistent answers. Either inconsistent answers within your interview or inconsistent answers with your DS-160 application. So when you're in the interview, sometimes the officer will ask you multiple times the same question. A lot of times they do that in order to check if you're really consistent and you're really telling the truth. Don't freak out if they ask you the same question multiple times, thinking, oh, wait, now I have to give them a longer answer. No. They're just sometimes just checking to make sure what you said previously in the interview, you're repeating again exactly the same, so they know it's consistent, they know that they can believe what you're saying. So inconsistent answers can cause a denial or refusal. Over-explaining or volunteering too much information is another reason to get a 214B denial or refusal. It's when you go overboard with your explanation and you're going on and on and on. You want to keep your answers short, concise, and clear. Do not ramble on. Do not give them more information than what they've asked. Okay, thank you so much for that gift. I appreciate it. You don't want to go over and over and over with whatever they're saying, whatever they're asking you. You want to keep it concise and you want to keep it clear. Be confident. If you're confident in the interview, more likely than not, you're not going to go on tangents, because a lot of times nerves can cause us to go on and on and on and on about things. Even me, I sometimes will go on and on and on about things because you get nervous. Another reason would be sounding coached or memorized. You don't want to sound like you practice too much or that you've memorized the answers, because they become very insincere in the interview, right? So if the officer thinks that you're just being a robot or you're just repeating what someone told you to say before you came to the interview, for example, like me, if I tell you to say something and you go in and repeat verbatim, word for word like a robot, they're going to not probably believe what you're saying. And that could be another reason they're going to possibly give you that horrid 214B denial. And the other thing that's really important is ignoring red flags from the first interview. So like I said before, if you go into an interview and you get a 214B denial or rejection or refusal, be very careful that you don't repeat the same thing the next time. So do your homework, either set up a consultation with me or look through it, or really think about what happened in that first interview that I shouldn't repeat in the second interview, because you know what's going to happen? You're going to get a denial again. So you don't want to repeat the same thing you did, but some of the things you have to repeat because they're facts and you have to say them again. But you want to try to figure out what you said or did in the first interview that caused that refusal, so you don't repeat it again in the second interview. Okay? If you get a 214B denial or refusal, one huge question that I get all the time is, how long do I have to wait before I can apply again for another interview or for my visa at another interview? There is no specific time frame you have to wait. It's not 6 months, I hear a lot. It's not any particular time that's required by law that you wait. You literally can go on a Monday and then go again on a Friday and apply again. If you can get an interview, that's a miracle. But if you can do that. Now, the key though is, do not rush into a second interview if you have not understood why the first one was denied. Because you're going to make the same mistake, and it's going to be a lot of time wasted and a lot of money wasted if you just rush into a second interview, not understanding why the first one was even denied. So please take your time, figure out what happened, and then schedule the second interview. So then you're more prepared and you're less likely to get a second denial or refusal. And the other question I get all the time is, if I get refused, is there a higher chance I'm going to get refused again? The answer to that is yes. Unfortunately, the more refusals you get with the same application, the more likely you're going to get refused again. So that's even more of a reason that you really have to sit back and make sure that you review what you have done in the first or second or whatever interview you are in the line of interviews. You really understand what went wrong before you apply again. And I know that's hard. Give me in the chat, give me a thumbs up if you guys get really frustrated, you've been refused and you don't know what went wrong. in the first one. Give me a thumbs up so I know you're out there. I'm sure a lot of you out there are very, frustrated is not even a strong enough word for how you feel when those things happen, when you get refused and you have no idea why. And when we're in the interviews, I know that it gets to a point where it's like, the respect for the officer, the nerves and everything is overwhelming, that you're not going to sit there and address the officer and say, so why was I refused? Like, why was I refused? You're not going to really do that. That's a very uncomfortable and a very aggressive thing to do, especially you're in your environment. Yeah, look at all those thumbs up. You guys, it's hard. And I know it's frustrating. So if you can come to me and I can help you, that would be amazing. If not, it's okay. You just need to make sure that you can sit down with yourself or with a friend or with someone else who's gone to interviews and kind of try to figure out, this is what the officer asked and this is what I responded and then I got denied, so what happened? And in a second, I'm going to go through a real world example of an interview that went bad, they got rejected, and then what we did to try to figure out why, and then they got approved afterwards. So in a second, I'm going to go through that. But I just want to make sure that you all understand that you're not alone. It's very, very common to get rejected or refused or denied a visa application and not know why that happened. I will put, like I said at the beginning, if you missed it, I will put below this video after it's over, I'm going to put a bunch of information for all of you. So you can go back and kind of click on those links. I'll put some videos that I've done in the past on YouTube if you haven't seen them regarding what to put in that box on the DS-160 if you've been refused. I'll put down there the link to the free visa interview guide and checklist. Please check that out if you haven't already. It's free. It has a bunch of tips and pointers that might help you figure out what went wrong, or more importantly, before you go for your first interview, it will give you information and a checklist. And I'll put down there, ways that you can get in touch with me to set up a consultation if that's what you want to do. Okay, let's go through now a actual real life experience of something that really happened, a real interview. I picked one that happened that called me this past few weeks, and she got her interview in the end. She got her visa in the end. But what happened was, she was a 38-year-old woman. I'm not going to say the country because it really doesn't matter what country in this scenario, but she was a 38-year-old woman. She went to the visa in order to get a B1, B2 visa, visitor visa, to go visit her niece in the US for a graduation. Okay. She had a stable job. She worked at a local marketing agency. She owned her apartment where she lived. She had an actual apartment, and she traveled before. She went to Spain, she went to Colombia, she went to many, many countries, and she traveled a lot. So this is a woman who has clearly a connection to her home country. She has a connection to her home country. And she had a specific reason for going, and she has a job and everything. And she's an adult woman. She's 38 years old. So the situation is, she went to the interview, and these are the questions that she was asked, and these are the answers that she gave. She was asked, what is the purpose of your travel to the United States? Which is an extremely common first question, right? She answered, and I took notes so we can do exactly what happened. She answered, I'm going to see my sister and maybe do some shopping and sightseeing. Okay, that was her answer to what is your purpose of travel to the United States. Now, I'm sure a lot of you out there know right away what went wrong with that answer. So if you do, you can put it in the chat and we can talk about it. The problem with that question probably was what? What do you think the problem with that answer was? That she's going to the United States to visit her sister and maybe do some shopping and sightseeing. That's pretty vague, right? That's a very vague answer. I'm going just to do some shopping or sightseeing. That's not a very good answer. It's not a well planned out trip. It's not really anything that's specific what exactly she's going to be doing. So it becomes extremely vague, and the officer's like, okay, like, what are you really doing there? Because that sounds really kind of whatever. And they do not like vague, unplanned trips. The second question was, how long will you stay? She said around a month or two, depending on how things go. Again, not a good answer, right? A month or two, whatever, we'll see how things go. That's a very vague and that's a very uncertain answer. That makes the officer believe, okay, so if I give you a visa for 10 years and you go into the US and you ask for, 6 months, you might stay 6 months, you might stay 8 months, you might stay 1 month. Like, what are you doing? We need to know how long you're going, when are you arriving, when are you leaving? So that was not a good answer. It signals uncertainty and not really truthfulness, I should say, if I'm going to pick a word. What do you do for work was the next question. I'm a marketing manager. Well, the problem is on her DS-160, she wrote marketing consultant. And what was before one of the things I said you cannot do when you go to an interview that will probably get you a 214B denial or refusal? Inconsistent answers. And yes, just the difference between a marketing consultant, what she say, marketing consultant, and a marketing manager, they will pick up on that and they will think possibly that's fraudulent or she's not being consistent. So that means that she's not really telling me the truth. So consistent answers are key. And the last question was, do you have any children or dependents here in Mexico? And she said, no, just my parents. Now, that was an honest answer. So there's nothing wrong with that answer. But it shows what? What does that show, having no real family or extended close family, immediate relatives in the US? Put in the chat, I want to see what you guys think, what that means to the officer and why you would get a 214B denial because of an answer like, no, just my parents. So while you're all thinking about that and putting that in the chat, I want to make sure you guys understand before we go forward, because I see questions coming through. At the end, after we go through this, I am going to answer questions. So if you want to hold your questions to the end, that would be great. If you want to put them in there, I will scroll back through and I'll see if I can grab some of those questions to answer them for you. So I will do question and answers at the end of this live for sure, because I want to get to all your questions, as many as I can, and we will get you those answers that you want. So what happened was the officer denied her, right, at that interview. She came to us and we had a conversation about these questions and the answers she gave. And a lot of what I told her was what I just said now, vague, inconsistent, and not really a planned out trip. So you need to then go back, look through what happened, look through the questions that were asked by the officer, like we just did, and analyze them and say, well, what was the answers I gave and how should I have made them better? So this is what we did. After going through those questions, we corrected the DS-160 and made it a marketing manager at XYZ agency since whatever time. So it's a very, very clear answer and it's consistent. So her job is a marketing manager, not a consultant. So we corrected the DS-160 on the next application. We clarified her purpose, because her purpose originally, remember, was to go to the graduation of her niece. It wasn't to go shopping and just do whatever. There was an actual specific reason to go. And that's one of the key things that you want to do when you go to an interview. You want to have a very specific reason that you're going to the United States. The more vague, the more open-ended the reason for going to the US, the more likely you're going to end up with a 214B denial. Because the officer can't grasp onto anything like, okay, that makes sense. She's going to the United States for her niece's graduation on this particular date, and then she's going to be back home. If it's just, I'm going to go shopping, that could be a 10-month shopping trip, according to the officer. Not really, it's not really going to happen in 10 months. But according to the officer is going to think, oh, it could be, who knows when she's coming back. So the officers like to see a specific reason that you're going to the United States. That makes sense of why you would go to the United States. And niece's graduation makes total sense, and it's an important event, and there's a specific date for it, and there's actually a way to prove that you're actually going to do it. The other thing we had her bring with her is a letter from her employer of how long she can have off for her job. So she was only allowed to be off for her job for 2 weeks. So since it was the case that she was only allowed to be gone for 2 weeks from her job, we had a letter from her employer done on their letterhead, officially looking, signed and everything, explaining that she is being given off from this date to this date in order to go to the United States to visit her sister and attend the graduation of her niece on a specific date, and that we must have her back at work by a certain date. So remember, it's very important that you say, or the letter says, and then you convey to the officer when you're there, dates. Give specific dates. I can't stress that enough. If you have dates, give specific dates, because it shows there's a specific event happening. There is a beginning, there is an end, there is a reason that they must come back by a specific date, and it allows the officer a lot more security that you know when you're going, when you're coming back, and why. Why is the big one. Why you have to be back in the United States. I mean, back home, not in the United States. You have to be back home. So they need dates, okay? And then I asked her to wait a little bit before she reapplied, to show that she was thoughtful in her planning of reapplying. Now, remember before I said, which I'm sure a lot of you heard me, that there's no required timeline you have to wait in order to reapply, right? If you get denied, you can reapply the next day. Doesn't matter. It really doesn't. And it really depends on why you were denied, how long you should wait. So it's kind of a strategic kind of situation of when the reapplication should happen. So there's not a one answer fits all for everybody, but there is no required wait time. I just want you to understand, because I've had people go to the consulates and the officers say like, oh, why did you wait 6 months to come back? And that there's no reason for that. The officer would just say that, I don't even know why, in order to harass the person or in order to just make it more difficult. I don't know why. But there's no reason to wait, except for a strategic reason. And in this case, I asked her to wait a couple weeks just so the officer could see that she did the work to get the information, to make it clearer to them exactly what she's doing, how long she's staying, and when she's coming back. Okay, and that's what it took, a couple weeks, right, to get the letter from the employer, to organize exactly the dates, to do all those things, so, and to reapply the DS-160 and then get an appointment. It makes you look a little bit more like you're thoughtful in the process, and you're not just doing a knee-jerk like, oh, you were wrong, I'm coming back the next day, and saying the same thing. So it gives a little bit of room to let the officer believe that you spent a little time thinking about what happened at the first interview, and you're coming back not with a new story, you're coming back with a clearer story. Okay, so that's another thing. You don't want to come back with a new story, because it's like, oh, last time I was here, I was going to do this, and now I'm going to do this. Now, it was risky a little bit in this particular case, because the first time she went in, she said, I'm going to go shopping, and we'll see what happens. And then the second time she comes in, she says, I'm going to my niece's graduation. Now, what do you think, and put in the chat what you think, what do you think the officer is going to think maybe, which was the risky part, about one time she's coming in and she says, oh, I'm going to be just shopping. And then the next time she comes, she's going to her niece's graduation. Put in the chat what you think, why the officer would think, like what would you think the officer is thinking when someone comes in and does that? What is the first thing that you think? Because to me, if you come in with one story and then you come in, all of a sudden you have this whole plan when you return, what do you think the officer is thinking? Right there, because that's a little bit of a strange situation, especially when you're coming in like I had her come in just very recently after. Because it's very hard for the officer not to know that, because the officer will a lot of times put notes in the file, so when the person returns, they're going to see, the other officer is not the same officer, will see what happened the last time. Yeah, and maybe it's not being done in good faith. Maybe this is a lie. Maybe the first one was a lie. Maybe the second one is a lie. Right? So the officer has to determine, were they lying? Or is it just that she's coming in to clarify? It wasn't just about shopping. It was actually going to see her niece's graduation. So the other thing that I wanted her to bring with her to the interview is, documentation of the graduation, the invitation for the graduation, anything else she can, maybe emails, whatever she can bring in order to prove that she was actually going to graduation. So if the officer doubted it, or there was doubt in their face when you walk up to the window, that you can kind of push forward the document to prove that actually she was going to go to a graduation and not just to go shopping. The other thing that she can bring with her is, the ownership of her apartment. She could have brought with her, she could bring with her pay stubs to show that she's really employed, other than the letter, the letter from the employer plus pay stubs. So all those things are going to be very helpful at the interview in order to provide more support at the second interview to show that the officer that she's really being genuine and being honest, and this is really the situation. Okay? So all of this is really important. She did go back, and the officer asked her when she went back, why are you traveling to the US? And she said, exactly, to attend my niece's graduation. And she's going from, this date to this date, and my employer has approved 1 week off, and here's the letter. Now, did the officer look at the letter? No, the officer did not look at the letter. So that's another thing that you have to understand, that just because you bring documentation, the officer doesn't always look at the documentation. I'll put a link to a video I did below this that discusses why does the officer not look at my documentation. But, you still should bring it, and you should still slide it towards the window, whatever documentation you bring, to show the officer that, if you want, I have documentation, I have proof here. You don't have to look at it, but I have proof. And the fact that you would push forward the letter gives the officer subliminally the idea that, okay, I think I can trust this person because I think they have something. So it adds to the credibility of whatever you're saying. The second question they asked is, what do you do for work? And she went into more detail this time. I manage digital campaigns at XYZ agency. I've been there for 8 years, and we're launching a new client project when I return, which was also written in that letter from the employer. So what does that do for her? That gives her more credibility, because she doesn't only just say, I'm a marketing manager, or whatever she's going to say. She gives them a little bit more details about who she is, her long-term relationship with this employer, which is less likely that she's not going to come back to that employment, that she's a professional, right? That she has a reason to come back to that job in the week because she has an actual project that's starting. So all those things in a very short sentence are critical to getting the visa approved. Again, she said, I manage digital campaigns for XYZ company. So let them know what exactly she does and for what company. I've been there for 8 years to show the credibility and the responsibility that she's a responsible employee of this company, and that she has to come back and probably wants to come back after investing 8 years of her life. And we're launching a new client when I return. Why I have to come back. Those are the ties back to your home country. The time, the confidence, and the precise detail is what got her the approval. So she ended up getting the visa on the second time by not necessarily changing everything, but just understanding that you have to be consistent, you have to be clear and precise on your answers, and give them details, but not too many details. So all of those things led her then to be in a position where she can get that approval for her visitor visa. Now, with all that said, and now I want to try to take some questions from you, but with all that said, I know it's easier said than done. I know I can sit here and I can tell you on and on and on about how to do this, but every single one of your cases, every single one of your experiences is going to be different. Every reason to come to the United States is going to be different. Everyone has some other different fact scenario. So I'm doing all this for you, and I'm really hoping, give me a thumbs up in the chat if this helps you at all. I'm doing this in order to hopefully give you more and more and more information that you can then translate into your interviews so you can get that approval. The more information that I can give you, the more examples I can give you like this one, which I will do probably in every live. I'll give you some real life interviews that happened and how we changed things in order for them to get approved. All of those hopefully will lead you to getting that approval and having an easier time at the consulates when you go to the consulates. It's really, really hard out there. Harder now than it's ever been since I've been doing this, and I've been doing this over 20 years. So it's harder now than it's ever been, but it's not impossible. Okay? Just know it's not impossible, I guarantee you. People get visas every single day. It might feel impossible if you're on your third time going sometimes to get your visa, but it's not impossible. It's just a matter of trying to figure out what the situation is that's stopping you from getting it and changing it and clarifying. And then you should be able to get that visa. Now, there's many reasons why you might never be able to get a visa, which, bars to come into the United States, criminal past, issues like that, I can't really help too much with. But if we're just regular people out there, right, trying to come to the United States to either study or visit or do whatever, there's a way to get the visa. It's just a way of trying to make sure that you're educated enough with what you can say and what you can't say in order to get that visa. And you can do it. I know you can. It's just a matter of getting the information you need. And I will continue to give you as much as I can. So make sure that after we're done with this, that you go below this video and you click those links for the free interview guide. Don't forget about the other information on the other videos, all that information. Don't forget to get all that and watch it, and then join me for lives in the future. I will always put them out there. Make sure you're subscribed too, so you don't miss the lives. And I'll keep going, and I'll keep going until we all get our visas, because we want you to get your visas to come to the United States. All right, let's get some questions in here. Okay. Sam, I'm third time rejected. I'm appearing to license exam. I show everything, still they rejected me. Okay, so some of the questions that you guys ask, they're very case specific. So I don't mind, talking about case specific things, but it can be a little bit hard because I don't have all the information. So Sam, thank you so much for your question. If it's the third time that you're being rejected, you need to make sure you go back and think clearly. If you can't work with me, which is not for everybody, but if you want, come work with me. If not, then you want to go back and really sit down, write down the questions that you were asked, write down the answers that you gave for each of the different interviews, hopefully you remember, and try to see what you did wrong in order to not be able to get the visa. Probably if you're appearing for a license exam, depending what the license exam is for, if you want to tell me in the chat what the license exam is for, then they'll probably think you're going to go to the United States to work. Because if you're trying to get a license in the United States, maybe it's because you're trying to work in the United States. So if that's the case and you're trying to get a visitor visa to go take a license exam for a job that might happen in the United States, that's likely why they're rejecting you, because they feel that you're getting a visitor visa for something that's not allowed, because you cannot work on a visitor visa. Okay. Let me get through some of these. Nausea. My visa was refused. Should I openly disclose my honest situation during my second interview that I would live alone with my parents and that I'm primarily responsible for their personal and daily activity? First of all, always be honest. First and foremost, you never want to lie or deceive the officer, because I believe a lie is always going to come out. And when you're in a situation like this, especially when you're nervous and you're trying to get through an interview, more likely you're going to fumble and you're going to say something that was different than what you lied about earlier in the interview. So first of all, always be honest. In your interview, if you live alone with your parents and you're the primary responsible person for them, that is a tie back to your home country. So it is something important that you need to tell them. Now, if that's the only tie you have back, that's the only reason you're coming back, then you might have a harder time, right? Because just having your parents, just be taking care of your parents is not always strong enough to make them believe you. So if you don't have a job, like a regular job in your home country, you don't have an extended family, like you're not married and have kids, which is fine. It's not a requirement to have those things, but those things can make the ties a little bit stronger. So what I would say, if your parents are elderly, if your parents are, hopefully not, but maybe, they're not healthy, you can maybe get a letter from a doctor saying that they need your help and you could only be gone for a certain period of time. You might want to explain to them that you're the only child, that you're the only one that can take care of them. Depending on what country you're in, the culture you're in, maybe it is traditional that you are the one that has to take care of them. So you want to give them a little bit more, but not too much, but a little bit more about why it's your responsibility to take care of your parents and why your parents need to be taken care of, right? Because if you just say, I live with my parents and I'm the primary responsible for their personal daily activity, but they're only 50 years old and healthy. That's not really convincing to the officer. So you want to give the officer a little bit more information about your parents, not too much, don't go overboard, but a little bit of information about your parents so they understand what the severity of you not coming back would be. Like, what would happen to your parents if you didn't come back? That might help the officer be more convinced if you don't have any other things you can use as ties to your home country. Okay, I hope that helps. Nazia, thank you for your question though. Parvish, I got an early appointment. Excuse me if I say your names wrong. That's my fault. I could say your name wrong. So I apologize ahead of time. I got an early appointment. Could that be a red flag for the visa officer? I don't know what you mean necessarily by an early appointment, but I have heard in India especially, there's places you go to get appointments that they basically can get you an appointment pretty quickly. And you pay them and they can get you an appointment pretty quickly. And then the officers don't like that. They kind of get weird about that. Like if you get an appointment that quickly and you use one of those agencies. I don't think it's a reason for denial. I think sometimes if you're denied, if you're refused, like on a 214B refusal, and then you come back like 5 days later or 4 days later with another appointment, and the officer knows there is no way you could have gotten an appointment 3-4 days later unless you use one of those agencies, then that might be something that they might be a little bit annoyed about because they don't like it. They feel like a little bit like it's cutting in line. So, or it's a little bit, weird. I don't know what other word to use, but it's, I don't think it's necessarily a red flag, but I think more importantly of when you get your appointment is, are you prepared for that interview? So if you go in and you got an appointment pretty quickly after denial, because I'm assuming you probably mean early appointment, meaning after a denial, then you want to make sure that you're really prepared and you show them that something changed between the interview that happened on Monday and now you're back on Friday, why you're there so soon and what changed. So just be careful of that more than how soon you got your appointment. But do be aware in certain countries, they don't like the fact that you use those agencies, but it's not a reason for denial. Let's see here. Thank you so much for all these very nice messages too. Bear with me, I'm looking through I'm trying to find a question. I clearly explain long-term goals to the visa. I wasn't able to clearly explain long-term goals to the visa officer. What should I do? I think a good answer to that question would be, there's a very, very fine line between explain enough that the visa officer understands what the goals are and what you're trying to do, and talking too much that the officer gets lost in your answer. That's the answer to that question. So it's a very fine line between, am I talking too much or I'm not explaining enough for the officer to really understand what the situation is. What I would do is I would practice before the interview and make sure, maybe practice with a friend. Or again, if you want to contact me, the links are below. But, practice how you're going to explain your particular situation, especially if it's a complicated situation or there's a lot going on, how you're going to explain it, very concisely, but get the information to the officer that you need. Because the officer needs to have the information that you think that they need to have in order to make that approval and get that visa approved. So you need to be the one responsible for getting that information to them. Because like I've said many, many times before, the officer is only going to ask a couple questions. They're not going to ask you what you likely want them to ask you in order to give them the information that you want to give them. So it's your responsibility. It's your responsibility. I can't say that enough. It's your responsibility to get the officer that information that it needs in order to get you that visa, to get approved, that visa. So make sure that you practice and you put together a concise answer that will explain your long-term goals, but make it short and make it concise. Don't go on and on and on. Let me see this question. I have refused the 214B because the officer did not convince from me I have a strong document and have scholarship. And now I'm nervous. What can I change in my DS-160 and what can I get the answer of what is the change in the application? It's, it's nerve-wracking when you don't know exactly what to do. I think, if the officer refused you because they did say you didn't have strong documents, or maybe they didn't think you had strong ties to your home country. That's two different things. If they didn't think you have strong documents, depending on the type of visa you're applying for, it would, you'd have to bring in more documents or more legitimate documents. Now, documents are tricky because one, they don't look at them half the time. And two, a lot of consulates around the world think the documents are fraudulent. So they don't want to look at them because there's a trend in some countries, not every single country, but there's a stigma, I should say more than a trend, a stigma in some countries that the documents are forged and they're not real. So a lot of times officers don't even want to see them because they think, oh, well, they're fake. So you want to really make sure that when you deal with documents that you have, if you're in a country that's okay with accepting documents at the interview, which some are more than others, that the documents are like on letterhead. If it's a letter from an employer, if it's from a bank, make sure it's an official document from the bank, or if it's printed off from a website from the bank. If it's transcripts, make sure they're official transcripts. If it's birth certificates, marriage certificates, make sure they're certified original documents. Do everything you can to make sure the documents are legitimate documents, or they portray to be legitimate documents. Everything you can. Originals, stamped, certified, encrypted, like with the stamps on them. So whatever you can do to make those legitimate. Letterheads. That's all I can say really with documents. And you want to bring the documents, but just understand they're not always going to look at them. But I told you before that just if you push the documents towards the window, that pushing the document toward the window subliminally gives you more credibility than not having any documents with you. Okay. Let me go back up, see. Bear with me here. Okay, if you feel that you were discriminated against, or you feel that the officer was unfair to you in a sense of something very extreme, there is room to, and you have to tread very, very lightly on this, okay? At the interview, if you feel like that it's a very bad situation, that the officer's not listening to you at all, or you feel that there's a sense of tension, meaning that there's discrimination for some reason or another, you can ask to speak to a supervisor at the consulate. But let me warn you, use that very, very carefully. You do not want to ask for a supervisor at an interview just because you think, oh, the officer is being mean or is a jerk or is not being nice, because that might just be their personality. So, because if you ask for a supervisor, unlikely if you're wrong, or if the officer is just being the officer's personality and it has nothing really directly to do with you in particular, you're going to have a stigma put on you. And if you're refused, very, very hard to overcome that, because they're going to think, why are you bringing a supervisor? The officer is going to get very offended and it can become a very ugly situation. However, over the years, I have seen situations where things are just not right at the window and there's something really wrong going on. Either the officer is new and they don't have any idea what they're doing, or the officer is just not doing their job appropriately, in a sense that it's so bad that you need to do something. If that happens, then you can politely say, you know, I think there's some misunderstandings and some confusion here. I would like to speak to a supervisor. Again, don't do that in any situation that you don't think is not severe, that you feel extremely offended and like something's really bad and something feels really, really wrong. Otherwise, you do not do that, because that's going to hurt you into the future. So just be very careful with that. You do not want to go there unless it's absolutely necessary and you have a very clear statement the officer made or did that you can point to the supervisor that will let the supervisor know that something's really wrong. So do not do that unless it's very significant and severe. But it is available. You can try. Doesn't mean that the officer is going to get the supervisor. It doesn't mean that the supervisor is even going to come. Doesn't mean that the supervisor is even going to listen to what you say. So just be very, very careful. But I will let you know that that option does exist out there. So another question is the portion of the DS-160 that asked if you have any other relatives in the U.S. If my purpose is to attend my uncle's graduation ceremony, he is the only one in the U.S. Then you need to put it, if you need to mention your uncle if he's in the U.S. on the DS-160 if asked. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. You can put that there, and then you explain at the interview very clearly that your uncle is the only one in the U.S. That's why you're going there, in order to attend his graduation ceremony. So you just have to be honest. Like I said, you always just have to be honest. All right, let me answer a few more, and I wish I could answer all these questions. It's just we don't have enough time, but I will continue doing these. I promise I will continue doing these live these interview tips, and I will try to cover different things in every single one. Okay, here's a question. It has not to do with these interviews, but it's a good question. I'm a Canadian-born citizen, got residency for the U.S. Then I acquired Kenyan citizenship. Does that mess up my U.S. green card? A lot of it depends on what the Kenyan citizenship required, if you had to be resident in Kenya. But really, U.S. residency, U.S. permanent residency is dependent on your time in the U.S. and your ties to the U.S. So you have to maintain your residency in the U.S. in order to maintain your permanent residency status in the U.S. So it doesn't necessarily matter about your Kenyan citizenship, as long as you have maintained and you stick by the rules of the U.S. permanent residency. So you can become a citizen of another country and still be a U.S. permanent resident. Okay. All right. One more question, and then I want to say a few things. I didn't mention my small side business on the DS-160 since it's not my main income. But my visit for that business partnership, is that a problem, or should I explain it in the interview? You should mention everything in your DS-160. You don't want to leave things off that are especially pertinent, or even more importantly, that are relevant to why you're going to the United States. If you did leave something off accidentally, or you did something, you put something inaccurate on the DS-160, you want to address it immediately at the interview so the officer knows that you're not trying to deceive them in any way. Sometimes the mistakes are made on the DS-160 and the appointments are already made, and you can't go back and change your DS-160 once it's in the system. So you want to address those inconsistencies or those errors immediately at your interview, so the officer does not look at them as deception, as being deceived or lying. So if you did something, like if you didn't mention a relative, say, I just want to let you know that I forgot when I was doing my DS-160 to put, my whatever. It'd be weird if you forgot, to put your mother or father. But if it's like some relative, like, oh, I also have a whatever in the US, or I forgot to mention my elementary school or whatever, something, like that, you might want to bring it up. But you don't have to bring it up unless it's something, pertinent. So if, for example, if you misspell the name of the junior high school or the secondary school you went to, who cares? Like, that's fine. I would not bring that up at the interview if you misspelled the name of a secondary school on your DS-160 application. But if you miss putting one of the trips to the United States on your prior travel, that you definitely want to bring up. I forgot to put the trip I took in whatever, you want to make sure you correct that with the officer so they don't see your travel history as inconsistent with what you put on your DS-160, to give you an example. So make sure that any inconsistencies or any errors or any mistakes that you make on the DS-160, you address them immediately at the interview with the officer and be honest. Like, I completely forgot, or it was an error I saw after I submitted it and I couldn't change it, or I realized after I filed it, or more importantly, which happens all the time, is let's say I filed my DS-160 in January, but I don't get an interview until August. There's a lot that happens between January and August. So a lot of times I tell clients when they go in, if something's changed between January and August, that you address that with the officer that, since filing my DS-160 in January, X, Y, and Z has changed and I wasn't able to update my DS-160. So I just want to let you know. That sends a lot of credibility to the officer. That's something really, really important to think about. If things have changed since you originally filed your DS-160, you really need to make sure that you convey that to the officer at your interview, because that will build a lot of credibility points with your visa interview. All right, everybody. I wish I can go on and on and on and on for hours and hours and hours here. And I promise you, please give me some feedback in the chat on how this helped you. Did it help? Did it not help? Say do it again in the chat so I know that you want me to do it again. Give me some emojis, give me something out there in the chat so I know that you guys are benefiting from this and that you want me to keep doing it. Because I am more than happy to keep going and keep doing lives for you. On top of, don't forget, I do the daily visa interview tips. So if you don't subscribe to me on YouTube or follow me on Instagram, make sure you do that. I'll put the links below this video after it's done. So make sure you come back after this is done and look at the description. I can't even talk. The description below with all the links. Again, if you want to set up a consultation with me to go through your particular situation, I'll put the links below also for you so you can set up a consultation with me. One-on-one, we'll get on the phone and we'll video chat and we'll go through your particular situation and help you get that approval. I also will put below, again, the free visa interview guide for you so you can have that free information in the checklist that might help some of you out there get that visa approval, give you some pointers and give you a checklist to make sure that you don't miss anything when you are going to the interview. Don't forget things because you want to make sure you have everything you need when you go in there. Also, I will put some links to some other videos about what to put in that box. Explain if you had a 214B refusal and you have to mark the yes box on the DS-160, what you should put in that box. I'll put that link below. I'll put a few other links for other videos. And if you haven't out there watched my new podcast, Interviews with Immigrants, where I interview immigrants into the United States to try to change the mindset of people about immigrants in the US, to give them a positive spin on who all of us are, right? We're all immigrants to the United States. Make sure you check it out. I'll put the link below here of the last 2 episodes so you can check that out. But don't forget to subscribe. Don't forget to hit that notify me, the notification bell so you're notified every single time I put out a video, every single time we have a live, so you don't miss it. And I really, really appreciate all of you, and I hope this was helpful and it gets all of you to that visa approval, because that's the end goal, is to get your visa approved so you can do and be wherever you want to be in the world. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful night, a wonderful afternoon, a wonderful morning, wherever you are in the world. And I look forward to seeing all of you next time. Thank you so much.